Welcome, Pewter Report readers, listeners, and viewers to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius. It's a Victory Friday edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius. Of course, I am John Ledyard from pewterreport.com. With me today to continue to break down the Bucs going to 1-0 on the season with a 31-29 victory over the Dallas Cowboys at Raymond James Stadium is the one and only Casey Hudson, who was with me for the pregame last night. Casey, excited to have you back on the show, especially because you were in the house as all this happened at Raymond James Stadium and the Bucs went to 1-0. What was that stadium atmosphere like?
Honestly, crazy enough. So you guys know that we did the pregame show. So I was rushing over to the stadium, had to park and then run in there, grab my credentials and get to my seat. But the best part, I guess, about being semi-late to that situation was seeing the fireworks going off and being able to hear that crowd just completely like radiate through Tampa Bay walking up to the stadium. You heard fans going nuts from the back of the parking lot. And I think that was my favorite part. I even tweeted it walking up to the stadium. I was like, I think this is the loudest that fans have been in years or ever. So it was fantastic. And then they had fireworks and so many things just to kind of honor that opening game. So I think everyone, including media, was just extremely excited to see that home opener begin and go off.
And that was just the beginning of the festivities for you, because if I'm understanding this correctly, Casey, we did the pregame show at Whiskey Wings in Temple Terrace, and it was great. Then you went over to the stadium, got your credentials, probably got in there just in time before kickoff. Then you're up. I don't even know. You probably, how time did you get home? Like 1 a.m?
Well, I got there at 1:20. I was trying to join you guys for post game and get in on all the excitement. I don't get out of the stadium parking lot until 1. I get to my house at 1:25, and then I have to unload the car. Like, we had a new Celsius load come in, so I'm getting that upstairs. And you know, a girl, she needs 5 bags just to get through a media day. So I've got the hair bag, the clothes bag, the shoes bag. By the time I get upstairs, you guys are like getting ready to wrap up. So it's like 1:45, 2 by the time I pack a suitcase, 2:30 by the time I take a nap.
Packed a suitcase. Why, Casey?
I was feeling spontaneous. The Bucs won, and I decided to hop and go to Vegas for 48 hours. So I had a 6 a.m. flight this morning. I took a power nap from 2:30. My alarm went off at 3:50. I picked up my best friend at 4:20. Got to the airport at 5:15, and this is where I am, guys. Welcome to Vegas.
Look at this. This is amazing. By the way, I asked the Pewter Report group, I just asked the rest of the staff, because I knew Scott was out today when he'd normally be on this podcast the next day. I said, like, who wants to come on the podcast or whatever today? And you were the first one right away to respond, which I just thought was normal at the time. Well, in Vegas, Casey, and you're still jumping on the podcast for the people.
I know, an hour and a half, 2 hours of sleep. And if anybody needs some insight on my life, I don't sleep on planes because, God forbid, if anything happens, I feel like I can rescue everybody. So I have to stay awake. So I stayed awake the entire 4 hour and 50 minutes of the flight. And then you get here and it's a 3-hour difference. So no concerns, everybody. Everyone's still sober on this side. But you get here and it's like, oh, it's only 8 a.m. in the morning. Yeah, it's only 8 a.m. in the morning. So it's like, oh, I might as well get some work done. And you guys are diving in deep and doing so much work on your end. I can't be the slacker. I'm new still, you know?
Well,
so, yeah, John.
You could have definitely said no, but I appreciate you jumping on here and giving us your insight, even from Vegas. But I hope you have some fun stuff planned for the next 48 hours that doesn't involve talking Bucs. But listen, while we're able to talk Bucs, let's talk about some of the stuff that's happened since this game ended. The Bucs obviously improving 31-29 victory over Dallas. They improved to 1-0 on the season. A game that left a lot to be desired on both sides of the ball, execution-wise or on offense, and schematically, player-wise on defense. There were a lot of question marks that we'll get to. As you were kind of at the stadium and witnessing some of these things, because we didn't get you on the post-game podcast last night, so I'm just curious kind of what some of your big takeaways were, and then we'll dive into Bruce Arians. We'll dive into his presser, some of my thoughts on Byron Leftwich. We'll talk about Rob Gronkowski's amazing performance. But actually, before I get your thoughts, Casey, before we get any further, I want to tell the people about Celsius and the tropical vibe that they've got going on here. Celsius energy drinks, they power active lives every day with essential functional energy. This is the tropical vibe sparkling starfruit pineapple edition from Celsius. Essential
favorite
energy,
flavor, by the way.
Metabolism. Is that your favorite one? You already know.
It is. Oh, yeah.
Wow. And you got Couple boxes. Yeah, I brought you some yesterday, right? When we did the pregame show. Have you tried any of those
a
yet?
dream
Are they
come
powering your
true.
trip to Vegas?
2 of them got me to Vegas. That's what got me through my flight,
2
if
of them.
anybody needs to know. Well, I
Amazing.
slept an hour and like 53 minutes, if anybody needs to know. So Celsius got me to the airport. And then once we got to the other side during that flight, when I kidded myself thinking I was going to take a power nap on the plane, no, I took Celsius. And then now I'm here, still going, guys. Like no nap, full energy. And yeah, tropical will be a part of my evening. That's for sure.
That's great. I love it. Yeah, tropical vibe, man. That's been one of my favorite flavors, but it's great energy that you need, but without the crash. There's no sugar in them, and there's a bunch of flavors, and they taste great. So go to Celsius.com. You can use the store locator, find out where Celsius are near you, and you can pick them up at your local stores, or you can just order on Amazon. Do the subscribe and save option, and you get a percentage off. You can subscribe and save, get the variety pack. You can get a certain flavor if you like it. Lots of options. Easy to do, obviously, that way too. So head on over to Amazon and get that thing done. Okay, let's talk about Bruce Arians here and some of it. Well, actually, first, let me get your impressions on the game. But before we go into Arians, you're there at the stadium. You're seeing this thing go down. What's your thought process here? What were some of the standout moments and themes of the game to you?
So something a little interesting is that listening to Bruce Arians' press conference between last night and today, because we had our midday one, is he hated the start of the game. Well, not hated, that's a little extravagant, but he didn't love the start of the game. He loved the close of the game.
Yeah.
Of course, everybody loved the close because of what we happened to pull off, because you have a vet who can do that kind of stuff. We have Leftwich, who's getting more and more acknowledgement for how well he actually does call plays. But for me, it was almost kind of a reverse. I liked how the game started out for the most part. I primarily liked the second quarter for us. It was that third quarter that was extremely sleepy. It was most of the fourth quarter for me that was just like, what's really going to happen here? Are we going to hand them the game? And then the fourth quarter miracle pull off in the last, minute and 30 seconds, if you will. So it was interesting to me that he didn't like the start, love the finish. I kind of preferred the start, and the finish kind of felt a little lucky to me. Some things that kind of surprised me, and I know that you guys are talking about it, not a whole lot of play action. I think we had 1 touchdown out of play action, though. So I kind of felt like they were going to try to build off of that and do it a bit more, and it didn't really happen. So I wonder what the disconnect was, or the mental errors out there on the field that they kind of have to work through. I know that training camp, you kind of saw some mental errors, and Bruce Arians was getting pretty irritated with that. But one thing I saw in training camp that I was really looking forward to hopefully seeing during the game was Tom Brady and Antonio Brown. They started to really strike up a hot chemistry there. So I really saw that becoming his go-to guy. And it's not because I have him on fantasy either, guys, relax, but it's also the fact that I called that speedsters were going to help us get down the field and help us get those yards that we needed. And it was Antonio Brown that did that for us. I mean, he had major plays last night. I was extremely impressed and was really excited because he loaded up my fantasy team, but he also helped me sound like I know what I'm talking about. So,
well, yeah, because you said before the game, he was the guy, and you said Scotty Miller too, and Scotty didn't get going, but that was because those top 3 receivers played so many snaps, Casey. I don't know if we expected that going in. Even last year when they had those 3 guys and they were kind of acclimated to the offense, Mike Evans' highest snap count percentage of all last year did not compare to what he played last night. He only missed 4 snaps. That was the most he's played since probably 2019 in a game, and percentage-wise. And Chris Godwin played all but 1 snap last night. Antonio Brown played way more than anybody else for that number 3 receiver role. So it seems like they are settling in to those 3 guys being kind of how they run their offense through it. And I like that kind of, as much as I like Scotty Miller, and he'll get his chances, and he only needs a few. And he played 8 plays, and he had a catch that was brought back due to a penalty. He had chances too, and he'll have chances in upcoming games. Evans will have more chances, but I like the fact that they're willing to ride with these 3 guys on the field as long as they're healthy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, last night showed us kind of why not. I will admit I wasn't expecting that. I did think that there was going to be a lot more rotation when it came to Scotty Miller and Antonio Brown. I didn't think that AB was going to be the go-to guy, but we kind of started seeing that momentum at the end of last season. So I wasn't entirely surprised. And everyone's talking about, seeing that old AB, seeing that Steelers guy, seeing Tony, toe tapper and stuff. He was really significant last night, not just because the ball kept going to him, but I don't know if anyone kind of caught a glimmer of when he would go off the field onto the sidelines, how he was pumping up his teammates, how he was talking to everyone. Rookies as well as, sophomores in the league have spoke on the fact that AB has been a huge motivator for them to go for more and to train harder and fight harder. So I was really impressed to see that last night. I was a little disappointed in the lack of play action. I was a lot disappointed in Bernard. He ended up being a key guy for us in that fourth quarter. And it's just kind of like, well, what's going on here? Is he going to contribute to the team? Is he just going to kind of be, that third guy that you put in here and there? And I know a Bruce Arians a couple seasons ago that said, if you don't have ball security, you don't have job security. So between Rojo's fumble and then Lenny, you just kept seeing them get opportunities, and Bernard didn't really get his major strides until the fourth quarter, which surprised me. So,
right. That's the big thing, was we didn't see it before that, with Bernard. I think when he was there at the end of the game, it was like, okay, he's healthy. This is crunch time. These are the moments that matter the most. And he's out there, so he must be healthy. He must know the offense, and I think those weren't the issues. I asked Bruce Arians about it today in the presser, and he was just kind of like, no, we're not going to play him anymore. He's our third down back, and he's, that's what and he's our 2-minute back. That's, that was it. He thought it was a crazy question, it felt like. And I was just like, man, your starting running back is over here, like, but his own words, could not mentally recover from the fumble, Bruce Arians' own words. And Leonard Fournette's out here dropping passes off his face, and you're talking about how the passing game for the backs was very average, and Giovanni Bernard's sitting on your bench. Like, I think that's a question that makes a lot of sense. Like, he could help you in
and
that
he's
way,
giving you production at that position. So I was surprised too when I heard his response to you, because it was very clip. It was like, nope, he's that, and then that's the end of the discussion. And it's like, even in pregame, we were kind of talking about the versatility you get with a Bernard. So why would he be your last resort? He can run. The one thing I do understand, probably from a head coaching perspective, is that those smaller guys on certain coverages, they're very hard to put trust in, because in 2 seconds of a snap, you've got a dirty dancing situation on your hands where the linebacker is just completely dominating your 5'9" running back. But Bernard, again, made some very, very significant strides for us. So I thought he'd get a lot more opportunity. And I thought that yesterday would have been the game to kind of, work through those kinks and see, okay, how much can we actually utilize him? So for him to do what he did, and for Coach Arians to just be like, nah, he's going to stick where he's at, it was just kind of like, okay. But I think they have to protect Rojo at this point. They've invested in him season after season. He started out fumbling in at least 2 major games, and then Coach Arians says the thing about ball security and then gives him another chance. So I think they're just really fighting to give him that last leg there.
Yeah, and this is the frustrating part with Rojo, because it's 4 years now, and this is what we said all offseason. He's clearly the most talented back on this team. He deserves, especially because Leonard had not taken the chance and really proven himself either. His struggles continued. I guess he made some plays in the playoffs, but his struggles were still there. His drops were still there. He still did things to hurt the team, like Rojo did. But the difference is Leonard seemed to be able to bounce back from those things, stay engaged in the game, and Rojo could not. And that's something that you'd hope as he develops and grows and matures. And a lot of things have changed with Rojo. That has not changed with him. We can't quantify that right from home, Casey. Like, we see practices and we watch players and we evaluate that part of it. But somebody said that my boy Rojo, Mike Reynolds said, my boy Rojo failed. I am so confused as to how Rojo is my boy. I feel actually like if I've been too negative to Rojo on this show over the past year plus, but he did fail, and Leonard failed, and Leonard kind of regathered himself a little bit and played a little bit better down the stretch, but it's still, that position remains a big question mark. Luckily, everything else around it on offense seemed to be very, very good. The protection was great. I don't know how much attention people pay to Pro Football Focus grades, or if they care. I've said many times that I like them, but I don't take them as gospel, and I've talked about why on this show again. But Tom Brady with a 93 grade led the Bucs. Alex Kappa at an 87 grade. He was second on the offense. Rob Gronkowski with an 85 grade, a 90 grade in the passing game for Gronk. He was third on offense. And then Antonio Brown with an 84 grade, Donovan Smith with a 78.8. Even with the 2 drops and a fumble, Chris Godwin was at 65.3. He would have had a massive game if not for those 3 negative plays. So offensively, very few negative grades to worry about, really, other than Ronald Jones, Cam Brate because of the blocking. OJ Howard barely played. Scotty Miller barely played. And I have to see the tape to see why Mike Evans' grade was under a 60 for Pro Football Focus. There may be no real reason there, but that's kind of what they saw when they watched it offensively. And it kind of matched up with what we saw, I think, too, Casey, especially when you look at what Rob Gronkowski did.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit when it came to Mike Evans, what possibly would happen, which always happens, the super lockdown that defenses cue in on when it comes to him. So I think it was almost the obvious choice. And then when they maybe wanted to go to him, he was in double coverage. But what was really benefiting the Bucs last night is, I don't know if anyone else caught it. Talk about a guy breaking through double coverage. Rob Gronkowski makes these guys look like they can't tackle. I mean, at one point, there was maybe 3 or 4 catches where you saw 3 or 4 defensive players, safeties and quarterbacks on Gronk just trying to bear him down. He's just walking through them like it's nothing. So that obviously became the better option when they realized that Gronk is back to doing what Gronk can do as a healthy Rob Gronkowski. But I think it just came down to the fact that Mike's either the obvious choice, or when it was time to utilize him, he was in double coverage, lockdown, or he wasn't making his strides down the field. So
yeah,
I like seeing Chris Godwin be so productive, because there was so much conversation onto how he was going to look this year, being quote unquote more healthy. Something else we touched on is that he kind of had a little bit of a tangle up in practice, and we didn't know how significant that would be. So to know that he can come out and play the way that he did and still make those clutches that he was making and stuff, then I think there's a big season ahead for him. Like the provider that you have in mind to kind of carry this team through, and then sneak in Scotty Miller for those big plays on the field. I guess at some point they realized they may have wanted to take, and that we were all hoping they would take, because the Cowboys looked a little bit stronger than even I anticipated. I have to eat a little crow today.
Yeah, and honestly, the situation with the wide receiver room is going to be fascinating all season long in terms of who produces and how much they're able to produce on a given day, because there are just so many talented players, obviously, but then there's also the way the offense is kind of wired to run, which is, I think, primarily like the slot is going to get a large volume. Chris Godwin's going to get a large volume. Remember, he dropped 2 passes, obviously, but even that, when you look at his game overall, I mean, he had 55 yards after the catch. He broke he forced 4 missed tackles. Gronkowski, you mentioned him, 35 yards after the catch, forced 2 missed tackles. Ability to make plays with the ball in their hands was not something we necessarily would have said was a strong point of this receiving core a year ago. It was absolutely a strong point last night. Antonio Brown picked up yardage after the catch and had one forced missed tackle as well. So it was kind of a theme of the night, was that all these guys made plays and were productive with the ball in their hands, which is really encouraging. Yeah. Very much what you want to see from this group. So doing things to help out their quarterback will be huge, with picking up those extra yardage. Not dropping the football and fumbling it will be even bigger as we get through this. And so the group I thought, was more on the same page than the drops would indicate. Like, I think in terms of what they're supposed to do, they look good. The mistakes were penalties and were drops. That's just stuff that happens, and it shouldn't happen, but it's stuff that you can't necessarily say, oh, this is going to be sustained. Every week they're going to drop pass. Every week they're going to commit 11 penalties. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen.
Yeah, I think it falls under the category of those early season kinks that you just kind of work through. But my only fear is 2 things. Last year, it seemed like we were a little cursed when it came to primetime games. They looked fatigued either early on, or they kind of felt fatigued middle through the game. Third quarter was quite fatigued, in my opinion. Then you just kind of have the idea that, aside from a potential primetime fatigue, you want these guys to not play against themselves, not beat themselves. I think so many people have talked about the fact that the Bucs are so good if they don't beat themselves. So yeah, minimizing those turnovers, having that ball security, and just really holding clutch to that can help us so much. Because imagine where that game would have been if we didn't give the Cowboys 4 opportunities.
Exactly right. I mean, that's what people were frustrated with Byron Leftwich, and they said like, oh, I was like, for what? Like, I know that play action, yes, I would have wanted to see maybe a little bit more of that. But again, we're quibbling at some points. When what you're doing is working, you do it. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And so, and they played through 6 play action passes. They used it at times to their advantage. You mentioned a touchdown. I think there was at least 1 touchdown off play action. Brady was very good off play action once again. But he was also good with just straight dropbacks under center, shotgun. It was all working for them. And so continue to use it all. There's no reason why you should feel like you need to get away from that one. It was a matchup where things were going to be available to them And it was if not for the fumble on the first play of a drive and the interception off Lenny's hands on the first play of a drive, those are first play of drive plays. Then you have the Chris Godwin drop on the long pass on third down that's inside the 5-yard line. And then you have the fumble that's at the goal line by Chris Godwin. So you're talking about a situation where this team scores at least 2 more. I think it's fair when you take those 4 drives to say this team probably scores at least 2 more touchdowns if in this game, if not for those mistakes. And that kept Byron Leftwich maybe from putting up in this offense from putting up maybe a 40-some point game where people would have been off his back a little bit more. But those mistakes were not Leftwich's mistakes. I felt like what he could control, especially red zone play calling, creativity in that area of the field. You talked about the bluff pass to Rob Gronkowski where Brady checks, has him in to block and then releases him, and he scores the touchdown, the second touchdown, the boot that scored Gronkowski's first touchdown. I think somebody even messed up the play there, but they still found a way to get it done on the first touchdown. So it was those kind of things, the creativity in the red zone, his ability to kind of pull out things the teams are just consistently not expecting in that area of the field. It's a real strength of his, and it's been a real strength of the team so far. And I'm just excited to see if he keeps this, we're going to be the aggressor approach, even against better defenses. I just think that this team can accomplish way more points-wise, yards-wise than they did in this game even.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because like you said, there's 2 extra potential touchdowns that we could have had there if we weren't playing against ourselves. And I mean, it all comes down to positioning as well. I think we were inside the 43 for both of those turnovers. So we gave them like perfect field position to just drive it into the end zone. We didn't even have to particularly force Dak to use that arm or do the deep ball, even though, he, again, did a little bit more significantly well than I was expecting. But
he was 2 for 7, I think, Casey, on passes of 20 yards or more in the air. He was 2 for 7. So as much as we slander the secondary, some of it was game plan stuff. Some of it was we're going to keep the ball in front of us. I don't necessarily saying I agree with that, but I'm saying that's some of what the easy completions was we're not going to let the deep ball beat us. We're going to play good situational football in the red zone. Cowboys were 1 for 4 in the red zone. So this is how they'd like to play. I think it's come back to bite them in certain games, but this is how Tampa Bay plays, and they trust their offense is going to outscore them, and it came through in week 1.
Yeah, and now they have this opportunity to either go right under or right over. So sitting in the press box, I'm sitting there and I'm like, come on, John and I just told this guy like over 52.5. They're barely right there. And then just get that field goal at the end of the game to secure the win. But yeah, when it comes to Dallas, we handed them 2 very prime positional opportunities to get in the end zone or even the field goal. I will say at one point, I really thought we had it in the bag too, because their kicker couldn't get it together. So between Dak looking and their kicker looking like Matt Gay, like I thought that we were going to be in great positioning, and then we handed them those opportunities. So I didn't think that we saw the best out of the Dallas Cowboys. They obviously have a lot of potential and ways to go. CeeDee Lamb did what we kind of anticipated that he could do to us. But yeah, when it comes to those positional opportunities, we handed over 2 of them for sure.
Yeah, that was the part that they'll go back and they'll say, well, if we cut out those mistakes, this isn't the game that it ended up being at the end. This isn't take this desperation drive from us at the end. And so I think those will be the things the offense goes back and look at. Let's talk about the defense a little bit and what they're going to face now. Sean Murphy-Bunting, we'll see what's going on with him. It sounds more times Rick Stroud was reporting today that right now it looks like Sean Murphy-Bunting is going to miss 3 to 4 weeks with the dislocation. The x-rays were negative, Bruce Arians said they're waiting on the MRI results. So that will be telling in terms of how much time he misses. But it looks like he avoided a major injury right now, which is obviously good, even though Sean Murphy-Bunting might have been the worst player on the Bucs when he was out there last night. Not to kick a guy while he's down.
While he's down, geez.
I know, I'm sorry, but we got to call it like we see it, and he really was struggling. I think he had 13 coverage snaps. He gave up 5 catches for 77 yards, and he was lucky to be the beneficiary of a couple misfires, and he played like a quarter.
Yeah, like that's what I was going to say, because it was early in the second, if not, late in the first, that he ended up going out that injury. But coverage wise, I mean, I never pegged him to be much of a speed guy, but I didn't see him unable to really, line up with his mark. But again, something else that we kind of spoke about is that he's been one of those very roller coaster players. He's had really sharp plays and prime opportunities, and then he's just kind of been like, oh, where is SMB this game? Like, what's he going to produce? Is he going to show up? Are we going to hear his name? So he came out with that inconsistency again last night. Or I can't even say inconsistency. I agree. Not to kick a guy when he's down, but it wasn't as sharp as game. It wasn't very, he wasn't able to really lock down on the wide receivers.
But the Bucs need him.
You know what? He was out.
They need him, though.
Well,
that's the thing. The answers behind him aren't great.
But I would almost take a Mike Edwards stepping in over Boss if he figures it out, and then a healthy Jordan Whitehead, returning. And then, is this not the prime opportunity to pivot over to Andrew Adams? We talked about him as well, being that guy that's just that clutch player out there in the backfield, and he showed up and locked down some pretty significant plays. So we need him, but do we need him?
Yeah, I think but you're right that Mike Edwards needs to play more, and this is the opportunity to maybe have that happen. And Bruce Arians actually talked about that today. Let me find that exact quote from him. But he was asked kind of about, it was a good question by Greg Allman. He asked him basically about if they get the chance, the Bucs get the chance to get Mike Edwards or get Jordan Whitehead back from injury, could it give them more flexibility in their secondary in terms of the way that they play? Would Mike Edwards be able to play in the slot some, or maybe Antoine Winfield in the slot some? I think it's more likely to be Edwards, but Arians said, yeah, it gives us great flexibility. Antoine Winfield Jr. has played it in the slot, and Mike Edwards has played it. So it gives us some really good flexibility, interchange those guys a little bit more and still have Ross on the field too, Ross Cockrell, because he can play safety or in the nickel or outside. So it gives us a lot more flexibility. We were thin really fast last night. I am very curious to see how they continue to play this, especially if it's matchup to matchup without. If Sean Murphy-Bunting's out for the next month, you have tough calls to make in the upcoming games because you're facing some really good receiving cores and you're facing some offensive minds that will absolutely put guys in the slot to take advantage of the fact that you just lost your slot defender, basically. And I'm not even saying that was a great role for Murphy-Bunting, but it's a significant question mark. Yeah. And so now, does Edwards step in there? Does Winfield? Does Cockrell stay there? A lot of questions, Casey.
So many questions, but without shooting my own horn, I think that we saw that Winfield Jr., regardless of size and matchup, the guy has so much hustle. He was pretty much matching his mark most of his plays last night. So when it comes down to it between size and, just strength would be the initial wrap up to lock those guys down. But he was in on almost every play that he was marked in to be on. Edwards, I would like to see a lot more production out of him because I think he has a ways to go. Last season, again, another guy who would come in on crucial plays and make those plays for us or help us out in those intense moments. So I think that if he's given a more consistent role, he's only going to rise to the occasion. I'd hate to speak against it, but again, I think that that's something that he could do. I think we can exercise that against the Falcons. My biggest fear would be going against the Rams. I think the Rams are a team that's going to teach us a very big lesson. Yeah. We want to have it all together. We want to really lock in on those mental errors. We got to work out the kinks before we go to LA and play LA because they've always been a pretty grind out team that's going to put on a good show. And now it's at SoFi, which you can only count on them to do more damage.
Yeah. Elliot asked a good question. Why was SMB picked for the slot role? Doesn't really make sense to me. Yeah, he was an outside guy in college. I honestly never saw him as a slot guy it was a big surprise to me when I learned he was going to be playing in there. But I think they don't really have a true slot corner and they want big corners and a prototype across the board. And so they've been willing to kind of use him in that way in their defense. And it works well enough. I think he had to play better last year and just didn't. I don't know if it was slot or outside or what mattered there, but that's kind of the rationale behind it for them. I think just they're going to have a prototype at all three corner spots that they want for the most part in terms of guys they draft anyway and develop. Let's talk real quickly. Leal Collins, JC Allen just texted me and I see some people talking about it in the chat. He looks like he's going to get suspended for 5 games. I think I'm not totally sure what it was. I see people saying PEDs. I don't know if that's a report or people just speculating, but
that's what I was saying.
Yeah, I don't really think he was that great last night, to be honest. I thought Shaq Barrett had a good game. 6 pressures.
Yeah, how often did we really hear Colin's names or really see him make a difference on a play? Couldn't tell you. So if he is taking that stuff, it's completely a waste to begin with, but even more of a waste if you're not going off in a game.
That's right. Tell him.
Not to completely come at him, but like, yeah, if you're gonna do that, guy, you better be like completely dominant on the field. I couldn't tell you how many times I heard his name at all. So
yeah, I mean, it felt like the whole offensive line for Dallas did a fine job, but at the same time, Dak was under pressure a lot. I think there were 19 passes where he was under pressure. So the Bucs, honestly, I'm not. The more I think about it, the more snaps I watch, I do not think I was disappointed with their front last night. I think Dallas did a good job in terms of picking up blitzes, getting bodies on bodies, and slowing them down, and not letting guys through clean. But even when they did let guys through clean, Dak got the ball off, and there was lots of opportunities and outlets for underneath stuff and quick game stuff. And what's going to be interesting, what's going to be actually probably one of the more telling aspects of this season for the Bucs is how they weather the storm in these first few games, Casey, because we mentioned the quarterbacks that they're playing and how some of their tough matchups are out of the gate, but they are facing, and I think one of the biggest difference makers in the NFL is your play caller and your offensive coordinator or whoever your head offensive mind is. They come out of the gate against Kellen Moore, who Dallas, and obviously Mike McCarthy as well, who I have a ton of respect for in Kellen Moore. Arthur Smith in Atlanta, who has been one of the best offensive coordinators in the league the last couple of years, no question. Been unbelievable with his red zone play calling for Tennessee. Now he's in Atlanta. You've got Sean McVay, obviously in LA. We know what he's capable of. He's torched the Bucs before.
Dangerous.
And then you've got Josh McDaniels in New England. That you're right out of the gate. I mean, those are four of the top 10 play callers, probably offensive designers, play callers in the NFL right now. And you face them out of the gate to start your season, and you're probably going to be facing them without your number 2 corner now. And so it gets easier after that. Certainly way more question marks at that side of the ball when you get to the Dolphins and the Eagles, the Bears, the Saints, obviously, good in that regard, but there's other question marks with their personnel. So right out of the gate, I think they're going to have some of their toughest tests of the season. I would put those 4 games out of the gate up there with the toughest they'll face, along with Sean Payton, and Brian Dable in Buffalo. I would say those are going to be their toughest games. So 4 of those come right out of the gate. Now you lose Murphy-Bunting for some of those. Huge challenge for the defense, what they do and how they deploy this personnel. I've been kind of banging the table, okay, like play Winfield in the slot. Let's see what he can do. Like find ways to get Mike Edwards in all 3. Yeah, like 3 safeties on the field that are as good as these guys. That feels like a good thing to me, but the slot is different than safety, especially if you're running a lot of man coverage for your scheme in that game. So there's still a lot of adjustments to be made for the secondary, even if those guys end up playing in the slot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, 2 golden points there is thank God we have a Todd Bowles for one, because you named a bunch of, immaculate guys who do very, very well at their job and who are going to present a huge difficulty to us. But something else, I mean, last season, I genuinely felt like we kind of played up to and down to the level of the team that we were facing. I mean, the Bears game was kind of a mess, sloppy at first, and we played down to their level, and then all of a sudden they just kind of overcame us. It's like we bit the bait on playing a bad game. And I felt like we did that in a lot of games. The Falcons, we kind of gave them, good opportunity to get ahead, and then we all of a sudden decided we were going to climb back into it. So I think having those 4, couple difficult games to begin with is going to force us to rise to the occasion and carry that momentum throughout the season rather than finding that stride, in week 10, 11, 12, and 13. My biggest thing when it comes to our defense is that we were a next man up mentality last year, and a lot of guys showed that they were capable of doing so. I feel like this is the year to see, like, okay, how much longevity do these underdogs have, or this next man up mentality? Again, I love the SMB has made some pretty massive plays, but his consistency is a bit of an issue. And Antoine Winfield Jr., what he did as a rookie and what he can build off of, and I think he had a heck of a game last night, and I think it's only going to get better, and I think Edwards has a lot more tread in him as well. So I'm not nervous if we don't get him back too quickly. And then we also have to think about the fact that
giving the people hope.
I'm giving you guys hope, because if he doesn't come back too quickly, we're hoping that Jordan Whitehead will be back, very shortly. And you made a really good point yesterday. I don't know if I can quote you specifically, but you were just kind of talking about like the pressure that he adds in, how well he reads on it, and how he kind of has that as a differentiator between most of the other safeties and corners on our roster. So bring in a guy who just has so much hustle. Like Antoine Winfield Jr. is brilliant out there. You can see that, but he's a till the whistle blows kind of guy. He's finishing that play until the refs are like, okay, enough is enough. And you need those guys when you play against strong teams. So that's the biggest reason why I'm not too concerned when it comes to our defense. I think the Rams are going to be our biggest challenge. I think that Tom Brady has this weird chip on his shoulder when it comes to Matt Ryan. So if it's not our defense playing the best game of their life, it's going to be Tom Brady.
You think it's personal for Tom versus Matt Ryan?
I think it's personal. I mean, what was it, the 2017 Super Bowl? Like, after he really just kind of dusted them, every time he's played the Falcons since then, no matter how good or bad they start, Brady's got a point to prove, and he proves it. So, you know, they're kind of in that rebuild phase, even though they have strong and smart coaches to guide them through. They're rebuilding. Matt Ryan's kind of on his last leg, whether he likes it or not, and they're in a new chemistry phase for themselves as well. So, you have a vengeant Tom Brady versus the Falcons, who are in a semi-rebuild phase. I think he manhandles that situation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I feel great about the result of the game. I wonder about the match, some of the specific matchups, but the result of the game, I feel very good about how that thing will unfold for sure. Todd Bowles, somebody said it's going to be a huge test for him too. Highest paid defensive coordinator in the NFL, and he'll obviously be matching up with some great offensive coordinators. And so there will be big tests for him as well. Speaking of big tests, we're going to take our coverage to beyond just the Pewter Report YouTube page, which, by the way, if you're not subscribed to Pewter Report TV on YouTube, please go over and hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to get the notifications when we go live for these shows. But we're also going to be on Spotify Green Room. Spotify Green Room is a social audio app that is changing the way we talk about sports. You can jump in there, find your favorite team. It could be outside of just football, your favorite baseball team, hockey, basketball, whatever you're into. You can get on Spotify Green Room and chat on there. Follow Pewter Report on there. You'll get the notifications when Pewter Report goes live on Spotify Green Room, and we'll send those out to you, and you can jump into those chats. Let us hear your opinions. In addition to just hearing our analysis and our thoughts, let us hear your opinions as well on Spotify Green Room. We have a lot of fun on there, lots to break down, lots to talk about. That's where we get into some inside scoop, behind the scenes stuff that we don't necessarily always say on the podcast. We say some of that on there as well. So it's a good time. So make sure you check out Spotify Green Room. All right, Casey. So the Bucs start 1-0, and obviously there's a ton of positives and a ton of negatives to rifle through in this one. But I felt like watching this game, Bruce Arians said, we won situational football. And I really wasn't sure what he was talking about other than maybe the red zone. That had to be what he meant, because third downs, I'm not saying that the Cowboys killed it on third downs, 9 of 17. You'll take that any day, obviously, but it wasn't like the Bucs were getting, every single third down. They were giving up for a while there. It was, they were winning that situation. 5 of 11, the Bucs were. So, I mean, both sides were fine. It's not the end of the world for either side. Certainly, Bucs would like to be a little bit better in that regard. But situational football, usually you're talking red zone and third downs or fourth downs. In this case, I don't think there were fourth downs. And so I don't know what he means unless he's talking about the red zone. I mean, in that situation, Dallas went 1 for 4 in the red zone, and Tampa Bay went 3 for 5. One of those obviously was just throwing a ball away at the end. So that must be what he's indicating. And I go back to this. How many times do we see when we're out of training camp, Casey, the Bucs working on red zone offense over and over again? Everything they do, it's in that area of the field. It feels like they know the importance, and it pays off for them in games.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll see them start with warm-ups over there and then kind of transfer over to some other things, and then end up back in some red zone plays, and seeing how many options they really have and that they can count on in the red zone, because we'll see them be more versatile in training camp and practice. And then when it comes to game situations, it's kind of more of a, you can kind of lock in on who they might go to. I know Gronk was huge for us last night, but I don't know if you recall, but training camp, or when it was like kind of wrapping up, we were seeing Bernard in a lot of red zone situations. And then it was just like, he was so ghostly last night. I'm still kind of pretty baffled about that. I don't know if it's personal or not yet, but to not see, those opportunities present themselves yesterday was pretty surprising. But it could be something that they hold to their vest and use against teams when it's very necessary down the line. But Yeah, that's the only situational football I can think of because
Yeah.
there were so many chances where it just kind of got put in our defense's lap. I mean,
Mhm.
defense had a heck of a game. JPP and Shaq had a strong game. I think we probably
Mhm.
saw a lot more out of them than almost Devin White and Levante. David, very close, but just a small
Weird because
margin.
Dallas hardly ran the ball, so it was like the first game in a long time. It felt like we didn't talk about Levante David and Devin White
Yep.
very often. And I'll just real quickly while you're getting that thought, Levante David led the way for this team in terms of PFF grades defensively, 84.9 grade. Carlton Davis with a 79 grade. I really think he played. Carlton Davis was targeted 10 times, allowed 4 catches, and gave up and had an interception and 2 pass breakups they credit him with, gave up just 43 yards. So
Yeah.
I thought that he played really well. He gave up one 22-yard catch, which was a tough one. He was still there. And other than that, he really kind of locked it down the rest of the game. I was very, very impressed with the way he played. And if he hadn't played that well, I don't know that the defense would have survived that game. But Vita Vea with the 3rd highest grade, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka with the 4th highest grade in his 21 snaps. Everybody wants to know how often Joe Tryon-Shoyinka dropped into coverage. The answer is 5 times. So maybe not quite as much as people think. Still probably more than he thought he would when he got drafted in the first
Yeah,
round
as a
as an edge
rookie,
rusher.
opening against Dallas of all things. But I'm really glad that you brought up Carlton Davis because for a minute I was just kind of like, he is got to be like CeeDee Lamb's embarrassing this guy. And then got to
Mhm.
the point where it was like enough is enough, and he was just really putting his body on the line to make sure that this guy was not going to run his name through the mud at the end of that game. So he really came up high and tight for the Bucs defense. And he's someone else who, in crucial moments, we've seen him make very magnificent plays. I'd love to see a lot more of that, but heading into this year, it could be, an opportunity for him to step up and make this defense more of his than kind of spreading it. I need to see those Gravediggers from the Washington game and
Mhm.
the what's the other game that I
From the
just
Saints game, really, I feel like
yeah.
that and the Packers game were statement games.
Yeah, and I was kind of hoping that they would come out almost like equally as abrasive as they did in those games,
Mhm.
but I know it's just the beginning of the season, calm down. But you're coming off and riding this high of reigning champions, so I thought our defense could have been a little louder last night.
Yeah, for sure. And this will be Carlton Davis. I mean, he is going to have to be just huge for this team over the next couple of weeks. I said
Yeah.
last year, I felt like Carlton Davis was this defense's most valuable player, not necessarily their best player, but the guy that if they lost him, I felt like they'd be screwed. And remember, early in the season
Hmm.
last year, I don't know if people remember, Carlton Davis went down a couple times with injuries. The Bears game, I believe it might have been the Panthers game week 2. So the Panthers week 2, I think it was last year. And yeah, there were just a couple times where he was you were wondering, oh, is he going to be out? Because this could get ugly if he's out, because I don't know about these other guys just yet. And now that
Hmm.
becomes even more important right now with the situation at corner being what it is, especially for the next month. So Carlton Davis is going to be a super important player for this
Oh yeah.
team, no question. Very interested to see what happens with this defensive line moving forward. Last night, Vita Vea played about 63% of the snaps, very similar snap percentage for Ndamukong Suh. Will
Hmm.
Golston was kind of third. He and Steve McClendon and Raheem Nunez-Roches all played about the
Yeah.
same, 28 to 31 snaps. It feels like they're just, no matter what, they're just rotating. Like, at least in this
Yeah.
game, we'll see if that trend continues. But there is a huge pass rush drop-off after Vita Vea, basically, with these guys. There's good players, but McClendon, no Nunez-Roches, they're not really pass rushers. So this was obviously a game where Dallas was going to be passing every down. That was very clear as the second half got underway, and the Bucs just stuck with that rotation. So do they keep
Hmm.
doing that moving forward? If they do, does a guy like Khalil Davis become active? Because teams are going to try and throw on the Bucs. I think the Cowboys and last year some teams too put the blueprint out there. We're not going to waste our time trying to run against a team that's this dominant against the run, at least not until we get the passing game going. And I think it's going to mean that Tampa Bay needs to figure out what pass rushers are going to be most effective for them on that interior defensive line.
Yeah, it's almost like they're still quite uncertain because I saw Nelson in quite a bit more than I expected
Mm-hmm.
last night as well. So I think the rotation was either more of a, protection of keeping these guys fresh to, give them longevity throughout the season or really see, okay, who's going to show up for us each game because I didn't expect that much rotation out of them. I thought it would be more of a Will Golston game for sure. And then, yeah, as I mentioned, like Nelson was out there a bit more than
Yeah.
I expected.
Yeah.
And
And Try and Shrink played 21 snaps as a rookie, right out of the gate, and Nelson still got 7. And JPP was over 90%, and Shaq was at like 85%. So they basically said we're going to play 3 edge defenders on the field together, and that is not a very common thing across the league.
No, and I don't know if it's something that they were just trying out or something that they plan on building off of, because it was pretty unexpected. That's why I can't wait to see what it is exactly we're going to do in terms of the Falcons. I know different teams have different requirements, but I can't say that it really worked for us to where it's something they might want to continue with.
I think pass rush obvious situations, maybe, Casey, were like 3rd and longs. That felt like they had some crazy packages there that Dallas just like, we're going to max protect and hope Dak gets the ball out quick. Not every team's going to have those answers. I think they're going to have a lot more success against some other. It's definitely one of those things where I don't know how consistent this is going to be in terms of playing all 3 of those guys at the same time, but there were a ton of snaps last night where those 3 were on the field, and a lot in the first half, especially. And you're right, it did not work at all, but I'm not ready to totally throw it out yet. I think Kellen Moore deserves a lot of credit for Dallas. He really kind of anticipated what Bulls was going to do, that he was going to blitz a lot, that he was going to drop out his linebackers, and he just kind of threw it underneath and said, okay, you guys go be coverage players. And they picked up yardage that way a lot in the first half. And so I think he had a lot of answers for what Bulls did, and he deserves a lot of credit too. Bulls may have still gotten him in the red zone, though, and that may have been the difference in the game.
Yeah, and I mean, what better way to make a difference than in the red zone? Right. And I think that was more of the biggest idea of it was kind of how we talked about the more that you can collapse that pocket and force Dak to run, but you don't know which run you're going to get out of Dak, the better off you may or may not be. I think we just saw a better run out of Dak than we expected, because he didn't have much time in the pocket. He did have to move and be mobile and either get down the field or start throwing, but he worked through something because he didn't look spectacular, but the guy's work ethic on top of, I think he just had a lot to prove last night, forced him to really just kind of make every snap count. So maybe that's why it didn't work as well as we would have thought. But imagine that against a Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's not the most mobile quarterback out there. He's more of a pocket passer who relies on his offensive line to give him the time to get that ball and that release.
Yeah, it is true.
So we might see it against the Falcons.
Yeah, we might. And the Falcons' offensive line not nearly as good at any spot as Dallas's offensive line. And so even with Zach Martin out, this Falcons, Jake Matthews, a left tackle, is a solid player. They're pretty much question marks across the board after that, and there have been for a while young players. The Bucs have had some success against that defensive line or offensive line as well. So that'll be one of the key matchups we talk about next week. Damian with a good point here. We should bring back Hamilton at corner. That's going to be it. What do they do? Is there a roster move here? Is if Sean Murphy-Bunting is going to be out 4 weeks, you put him on IR. You can bring a guy back after 3 weeks if they're on injured reserve. So that wouldn't be a concern there. You give yourself a roster spot temporarily. Does Herb Miller come up? What happens at corner? Antonio Hamilton, let's just be real. I don't know how much they're going to say, but is he vaxxed? That's going to play a role in this for sure. I think whether that's happened for him or not yet at this point, we don't know. So it's a good point by Damian. Some move will probably be coming at corner if Sean Murphy-Bunting is out long enough to go on injured reserve. By the way, if he goes on injured reserve, just to take a look at that really quickly, and let's say he's out the next 4 games, that's there is 10 days until the next game. So maybe that's pushing, but let's just guess 4 games. And let's say Atlanta, LA, New England, the Dolphins. Then there's the short week to week 5 with Philly. So they might just have them skip that one if they can. If Philly's struggling like we think they will be, and then say, okay, we can win this one without you. Come back strong October 24th against the Bears. That one will need you for. That could be how they choose to play, just looking at the schedule, because he's right on the crux of that short week with the Eagles game.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't want to force it. So that's where you really hope that these other guys step up. I mean, when it comes to Edwards, it's like, how bad do you want this job? Because you've shown really good strides. You just have to do it a lot more. And that's
if you can play in the slot, right? If you can play in the slot, you earn yourself playing time even when Murphy-Bunting comes back, perhaps. Murphy-Bunting could play outside, and maybe it's Dean who sits down, and you've proven you can play in the slot. You're able to keep Murphy-Bunting outside. Edwards is able to play some in the slot, or Winfield is maybe. Bruce Arians mentioned his name. Edwards plays free safety. Jordan Whitehead strong safety. And now maybe you've got your best 5 defensive backs on the field if Jamel Dean is still struggling as he was last night.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we've seen good glimmers out of Jamel Dean. I mean,
Oh
I don't
yeah.
know if that was just kind of a lack of preparation thing. He had a big play on a screen last night, but I was hoping to see a lot more of that as we continue through the game, and it was kind of hit or miss. So
Mhm.
he's someone else who's, I wouldn't put him equal to an Edwards, but he's somebody else who has kind of come in and done that next man up mentality and been significant for us. But he definitely has a ways to go where he needs to look a little bit more prepared and locked in. He kind of bites on those tackles sometimes, and he shows him,
Mhm.
which can cause us to make some pretty big mistakes. But I would like to see a lot more out of him. I just think that, and nothing against Sean Murphy-Bunting. He has been a key guy for us for a reason. It's just the consistency on his end as he starts getting, more seasoned and getting that status with this team.
Yeah. Some people have said in the chat, and I think it's worth addressing, give Richard Sherman a call, see what's going on. I'll
Oh
say this. We
no.
obviously, last time we saw Richard Sherman, there was obviously Richard Sherman was having some personal issues. He was going through some
Mm-hmm.
struggles. I don't know where he's at with any of that. I won't speak to it and won't speculate. As a player, Richard Sherman was still good last year,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a fit for the defense. Schematically, what they run is really what Richard Sherman brings to the table. He would be
Yeah.
fit in terms of mold, the physical mold, the athletic mold, everything that they look for, he does. So I've always said that. I think I said that this offseason too. I never thought they would go after him. I never thought they would. They like the guys that they have, I think. But
Yeah.
if Dean is struggling and if Murphy-Bunting ends up being out longer than expected, or any injury happens throughout the season,
Mm-hmm.
and Sherman is in his personal situation doing a lot better and a lot healthier, I don't know what's going to happen. But that would be something that they may potentially look at because of that. So we won't go any further down that path. I know people already think, no way, or yes, or
Oh, you saw my face initially. I'm like,
you
no,
were
don't
like,
go there, John, please.
no
But
drama.
I mean, no, there's no personal vendetta against the guy. I mean, when it comes to talking game, like his size and his ability to get down the field and his matchups when it comes to, I don't know, 80 to 90% of the league, that's a guy that you are going to want on your roster because he's going to be extremely helpful. I'd just rather be a little bit silent, but I mean, beggars can't be
The
choosers.
only the only guy in all my years of watching and covering the Steelers that I felt like actually could match up with Antonio Brown in coverage. Like I just felt like he was that good of a player that he could actually beat. Like no, even the good ones couldn't really handle the smoke with AB
Yeah,
when he was in Pittsburgh. But he was one that. So anyway, that was years ago though, and things are different now, and we'll see what ends up happening with them
and we're not
at the
100%
defensive
sure.
backfield. No, you are
Exactly.
not about a lot of things when it comes to him. Hey, we are 100% sure about our friends over at Living Golf Life, though. I'm telling you, livinggolflife.com. These are great guys. They're great people. They're the kind of people you want to support when they start a business. They have launched their business. This thing is up and running, livinggolflife.com. Go head over and check out what they've got. Some great stuff over at livinggolflife.com. What I really enjoy about their stuff is that they take a lot of time and attention to make it look really good in their design. And so they've got polos over there. They've got hats. They've got koozies. They've got glasses. You can see other side, one behind me over here, the Living Golf Life koozie and the glass over here. So I just think they're good. They're good dudes. They're the kind of dudes you want to support. And they get it in terms of how this thing should look, how this thing should feel. They get that golf is a lifestyle. You want to get out on the course and throw a couple brewskis back and have a good time. And they understand that. And it kind of goes into the whole mantra of what they do. So check out livinggolflife.com. Check out the golf lifestyle. Get yourself some sweet swag and ask for it for presents too. Do that kind of thing. Get it for somebody else as a gift. That's a good way to handle it too. Won't be too long before we're in the holidays. So head on over to livinggolflife.com and check that stuff out. All right, Casey, final thoughts as we close this thing out on this performance and the biggest question marks you have moving forward. I'll let you think for a second. I'll go ahead. Biggest, most surprising thing to me in this game, I think, was this play of the special teams. And so that also brings me to my biggest question mark. What happens now? Like Jaden Mickens has clearly proven himself with that performance. You can't
You took
put
that
that
right
guy
out of my mouth.
right. Like that. So maybe that'll be both of ours. But what do? You can't bring him back to the practice. You can only elevate him so many times in the practice squad. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, even if Jalen Darden is ready, and Bruce Arians said today, it's nothing against Jalen. We just know Jaden. We trust Jaden right now, and he's playing really, really well. And I think he's right. I think Jalen Darden's still a great, long term for this team. He's going
Yeah.
to be a big part of the solution. But right now, Jaden Mickens is a guy I don't think you can take off the field. So what happens? The Andrew Adams situation's easier. He's probably going to stay up. Chris Cooper goes back down. Do you keep 7 wide receivers up? And if you keep 7 wide receivers up, you don't have any. I mean, Scotty Miller and Tyler Johnson do not play special teams, Casey. So if you move somebody else down, like a Grant Stewart that's a contributor on special teams, you lose a body there, and you have to figure out how to kind of replace him. So there are tricky layers to this with Mickens that make it hard to like find the wiggle room with a roster spot right now.
Well, it does, because just kind of going back to those guys that you can rely on. I mean, we talked about that a little bit yesterday in terms of the fact that Mickens you can rely on. And last night, I'm not going to lie, the kid was playing like he was fighting for that slot, that job, and not wanting to give up that opportunity to anybody, including Darden. So I think we've seen some of his best run backs in his entire career thus far. And how do you really kind of look at that and say no thank you in comparison to a rookie? Darden didn't have the best preseason where you would kind of choose him over Mickens. So special teams was one of my biggest notes, because he was quite significant last night on special teams. He helped us get up the field, and you can tell that he is fighting to stay on this team and to stay on this roster. It just might not play out if we're looking long term, because at what point do you start kind of focusing on that down the stretch team? You know, we won a Super Bowl. Yep. There's some positions where you're going to have to take those risks and start working on those younger guys and letting them build and grow so that you can rely on them on year 2 and year 3, and your team is all on the same page, versus a Mickens that may or may not contribute to this team and actually, I don't know, really gel and fit in. There's something else going on there where I just don't feel like he completely fits in, but he's beneficial.
Yeah, for sure. And especially in an area where they have not had many standout positive performers for a while in special teams. And so actually Greg Allman just tweeted that Chris Cooper has been waived and Jaden Mickens is on the 53-man roster now. So he's not going back down, as we kind of expected that. Now we'll see what happens with Andrew Adams. Does he go back down? Obviously, Chris Cooper, if he clears waivers, will go to the practice squad. What happens with Andrew Adams from this point? Does he go back down? And so we'll have to evaluate and kind of see what happens there.
Yeah.
Still some question marks.
I think Adams needs more of an opportunity. I think Adams needs more time. I think that
you want to play all the safeties, Casey. 4 safeties.
I want them all. Give me all of them.
If the corners keep playing the way they looked last night, you might get your wish. We might get 4 safeties and Carlton Davis out there.
Okay, but one guy really kind of embarrassed half of us. I have an issue with that. Like, I know that Lamb is a talented receiver. Amari Cooper was a lot more silent than I anticipated, but just to hear Lamb with the first down and Lamb, I was like, well, is somebody going to do something with this guy? Like,
and he had 2 drops. Imagine if he hadn't had 2 drops, he would have really.
Yeah, he helped us on some of those plays. Yeah. So it's like, come on, I need somebody to again, that grave digger, that real grit that we were seeing in those last couple of games. I need to see that again before I'm like, yeah, well, I'm really leaning towards these guys. It's kind of like, hey, who wants the job? Who's going to do it?
Right.
I tweeted a Captain America for Andrew Adams last night, because why does he just happen to be on those plays that can make or break us in those moments? So give the guy more of a job.
Yeah, every time he was a guy that started for the Bucs for a couple of years, before they drafted Winfield and Edwards, and obviously, and then now it's a situation where when he gets called upon, he's reliable. And I think Bruce Arians spoke to that today about how they were watching him kind of the whole time he was on the Eagles, the whole time going through camp. They were watching to see what would happen and see if they could get him back, and then it worked out, obviously. So this team very much built like a family in that way, just the same way Bruce Arians built that coaching staff. So we'll be back next week on the Pewter Report podcast. We've got lots to talk about beginning on Monday. We actually are going to take a little bit of a break Saturday and Sunday. You'll still see the written content. By the way, if you haven't checked out pewterreport.com today, check out pewterreport.com. There's like 18 articles up on the site today. It's been a lot of fun, but there's a lot of content, and there's more coming tomorrow and the next day. Keep popping in over there, checking it out over the weekend. And then on Monday, we'll be back with the podcast. Scott will be back, I know, on Monday. I'll be back on Tuesday with the podcast, and we'll keep you rolling throughout the week. We'll have our game preview Wednesday, guests on Thursday. We'll roll through with Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday podcast, get you ready for Sunday's game, 4:00 game against the Falcons. So it's been a fun time. Casey, enjoy your time in Vegas over there. I'm not going to say I'm jealous. I'm very happy where I am here in the sunshine in Tampa Bay, but I think you're going to have a good time for the next 48 hours, and you deserve it. A lot of hard work on that game last night, and Just take some time to relax.
I mean, it was like the one opportunity before this marathon really takes off. If
That's
it makes
right.
anybody feel better, I brought some of the rain with me if anyone hears the thunder in the background. But it's that last vacation before we're like, oh, we're not going to see the daylight until March. And then who knows, hockey season's at that point too. So
it's true. Yep.
48 hours. Yep. I'll sleep on Monday.
There you go. Hey, live it up. I love it. Live it up. Thanks to the fans and everybody for jumping in the chat. Appreciate y'all. You guys have been great throughout the last couple of days, especially with all the streaming. Thanks for all the support. G Vegas says John definitely needs a break after being online for like 12 hours yesterday. I actually got several emails, and I actually appreciate this. I got emails and DMs on Twitter from fans actually concerned about, like, am I drinking enough? Am I eating enough? Like, because I was on so long yesterday.
I was
appreciate
y'all.
I
was he's still talking.
But I ate almost nothing for 24 hours. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah,
it was,
like, when did you eat?
I ate after the in-game stream. So we got there. I got to Whiskey Wings and we set up and everything. I didn't eat anything. And then we did the pregame show. I didn't eat anything in the car. I drove back, jumped in, I got in my office, set up for the in-game stream, did the in-game stream. And it wasn't until midnight, my wife brought me like a warmed up pizza of Domino's pizza and I ate it. It was like 4 bites, but I ate it. And that was all I ate that. Eat anything until like 11 or this morning after we got up a bunch of content. I made myself an omelet, but it's
so it was to a whole nother level.
That's right. Exactly right. No, it was interesting. We're gonna do it again on Sunday though, so it'll be a lot of fun. But I do appreciate fans reaching out. It's been a lot of fun. It'll keep being a lot of fun. We'll keep rocking the content for you here, and we appreciate y'all jumping in for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.
Yes. Bye, guys.